Let me introduce the panels today, the panel discussion session. We have Mr. Mathew Phillips. He is the Senior Director, Business Development and Alliance, LogMeIn, and CEOs from various IT companies and real wars and valued resellers. And they are Vishal Bindra, Founder and CEO, ACPL Systems, and Mr. Prashant Jain, Founder, JNR Management Resources Private Limited, and Mr. Rajeev Mamidana, Managing Director, Synaptic Solutions, and myself, Deepak Kumar Sahu, Chief Editor, VARINDIA, are going to moderate the discussion. The topic of today's discussion is how channel partners are enabling their customers in navigating through the evolving cybersecurity landscape. In most enterprises, one of the biggest challenges that they face is their current levels of cybersecurity are not enough to protect their endpoints and servers. There's a huge opportunity for all security partners to work on building products and services around endpoint and network security to keep threats like ransomware at bay. It is not just computer networks and computer information systems that are being attacked. Cyber attacks are also infamous for attacking computer infrastructure and people's personal computers. So let me brief about the panelists. Mr. Mathew Phillips is a business leader with around 21 years of experience across business development, strategic alliances, and people management. He heads LogMeIn as the Senior Director, Alliance and Business Development, where he has the charter of building strategic partnership with global system integrators and exploring synergies with complementing technology players. Mathew is an avid leader and a movie buff. He believes that laughter is the best medicine for a stress-free life. Welcome, Mathew. Mr. Vishal Bindra. Mr. Vishal Bindra is a serial entrepreneur with 32 years of experience in the field of cybersecurity, with ACPL as cyber-focused system integrator, classified as top RegTech product, and attack fans as network detection and response are the products. He's a huge fan of Vedic science and art. Welcome, Vishal.
Thank you.
We have Prashant Jain, a well-known chartered accountant in practice with more than 30 years of experience, founder and CEO of JNR Management since 2003, Platinum-led partner and biggest distributor of DigiCert in Southeast Asia, Platinum partner of Thales with presence in all 4 metros, managing more than 50 Tier 2 reseller in India, SAARC, MEA, and APAC. Welcome, Prashant.
Thank you.
Let me introduce Rajeev Mamidana. He comes with a rich background of having worked for MNCs like Sun, Dell, Cisco, and IBM before taking the entrepreneurship plunge. He founded Technosprout Systems and Synaptic Info Solutions to focus on the cybersecurity technologies like identity and access management, advanced email security, and data protection. With digital economy getting an unforeseen acceleration because of the pandemic, he works closely with customers to protect their infrastructure assets as well as their ongoing security posture. Welcome, Rajeev.
Thank you, Deepak, and apologies from my side for the camera not working. I'll try and work it around while you are speaking.
Absolutely, you have to fix that. Okay. Okay. So let me start the questions to other panelists, starting from Mathew. Data breaches are increasing many folds where information is stolen without the knowledge of the system owners. What do you believe is the reason for the same? And what do you think is potential impact due to this on business? Over to Mathew.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Deepak, for inviting me for this panel. And it's wonderful to be with so many of these esteemed panelists. And thank you, audiences, for listening in to us. So now coming to the question which you asked, Deepak, see, cyber threats have gone up drastically post-pandemic, and all of us are aware of it. I mean, if you go by the numbers, it's anywhere between 300 to 400%, right? Cyber threats have gone up since the pandemic started. And if you look at breaches specifically, then in less than 2 years, it has gone up by around 150% as per one of the research by Tech Target. And I mean, again, throwing some data points here because that will help me build my answer to this. If you go by Verizon data breach report, 80% of the breaches, right, which were caused by poor password practices. Now, When we say poor password practices, it could be like reused passwords, it could be like weak passwords, it could be even password sharing, right? And all this is getting associated with user behavior. Now, what I'm talking about is again reiterated by a recent IBM security report, which was released. Some of us would have read it, which states that 82% of the individuals surveyed admit they reuse password accounts, right? And which is one of the, the biggest possible risk when it comes to breaches, right? And if you go through another finding, which is basically the psychology of password report, 80% of the respondents who were covered under this research talked saying that they were worried about, 80% of them were worried about their passwords getting compromised, but only 48% of them changed the passwords. That also only if they were mandated, right? Which means, which we also today know, right? We all know passwords are important, but when it comes to changing our passwords, we only do it only when we get maybe the second or the final reminder. Only then we'll end up changing it. And even today, if you look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or something like password as a word itself are the most commonly used passwords, right? So no wonder hackers don't even have to put in effort to hack. They just log in, right? Now, that's the reality. And this is obviously remote work and work from home are some of the main reasons why this trend of information stealing is happening. And that is because you'll see a growing trend of people using their personal laptop for office work or possibly using office devices for personal work. Obviously, a lot of shadow IT getting adopted, which means a lot of software application and software coming in, which is beyond the company's approved software on your devices, right? So a lot of things which are which are basically linked to user behavior. Now, one final point from my side on this, obviously, as people overnight, a lot of organizations, when the COVID or the pandemic started, had to quickly move their employees to home, right? And we have heard of lakhs of employees getting moved in some of the larger organizations. And with that, cloud adoption became very, very huge. And that, again, is some of the reasons why the breaches have gone up. Because if you, again, look at the IBM security report, which I just quoted, you can also see that the surveyed companies, how they are getting impacted, right? And your last question was, how does it potentially impact the businesses? Now, the impact can be something as much on the brand, which are more qualitative, the consumer confidence, the shareholder confidence, all these could be potential impacts. But if you look at financial impact, the IBM security report, which recently was released, talked about $4.24 million is the impact on an average per incident, right? And this impact, which is the $4 million plus impact per incident, is the highest cost in the 17-year history of the report, right? So I think I have answered what you asked, Deepak, which was why is it increasing, and obviously what is the potential impact of this increase on businesses.
You're right, Mathew. Now we will understand from Vishal.
So I think, next time, please ensure you speak to me before Matthews, because he's explained everything. Okay. So
Okay. No, you have a practical experience, so you can tell in
he said laughter is the best medicine, so I was just using that on him. That is all. So yeah. So yes, I think he's already stated what why the impact has why more data breaches have happened and other things. I think why one of the very important things that we need to figure it out, that it is now becoming less of a technology problem, more of a process problem and people problem. And I think the more that we realize that particular thing, you will be able to realize that. I think all the technologies are today available, which give you enough strength to really, put a lot of controls into the system. And we see that, most of the breaches which has happened, or people who actually at least come to know of those breaches, are, from those people who would have probably best of the securities, which have been deployed. But, the basic hygiene, which we call hex hygiene, which is there, it is absolutely really missing, from the customer side, that, they believe that, a CISO or a CIO would believe that, there is a, people who will be changing their password, they would have kept strong passwords and other things. So I think it is extremely important. Second, I think, one thing which I think, Matthews did not really mention, if you really go through the lot of data breach reports, there's a very strong figure which is there. More than 38% of businesses who have suffered a data breach have actually shut down. Yeah. So I think that is a very, very important thing for us to know, that, it is not something that, what will somebody look at from my email perspective? See, nobody is coming after your emails. People are coming after your very important thing. Either it has to be your data, either it has to, I'm sure, if you speak to Prashant, one of the very common problem that, while he does a lot of work on security, especially on, email security stuff also and other things, a lot of people would come in that, oh, I have actually ended up paying the, wrong money to the wrong invoice, to wrong these people, which is called, probably invoice frauding and, other things. A lot of those things, if you look at it, a lot of those things can be, reduced by ensuring that you put in a lot of controls into this place, both in process and, people process, which is. So I think if somebody will suffer that kind of a breach, let's say a small company which is a revenue of, let's say, 10 crore rupees a year, and ends up making a 50 lakh rupee wrong payment which is unrecoverable, that's a huge loss that has happened to them. So I think we need to really realize is that, we need to now go back to basics. I think COVID has taught us to go back to basics in a lot of things, in our health, in our behavior. I think it's high time that, we need to look back from our IT practices. I think that's it from me.
Okay, wonderful. I think Mr. Prashant Jain will have a different perspective.
So I would only add to what Mathew and Vishal Bhai has already articulated. So what I strongly believe is the problem, especially in our country, is that we implement security by compliance and we do not implement security by design. So that is one of the biggest challenges in terms of corporate life, in terms of enterprises. Big or small doesn't matter. It's all about how you implement the security, why you are implementing this, any kind of a security. Because it is more of a compliance. Had there were no regulatory bodies putting those compliances, probably none of the enterprise would have really cared about implementing security by design, number one. The second point I would like to make here is that the user awareness. So we are talking about only one side, that breaches happening at the enterprises, and those are the numbers which are really published by IBM or other security reports. But there is a huge amount of number which is on the individual side also, as consumers. Breaches happening by the consumer for their own, there could be many reasons. They could be naive, they could be not aware of what they should be doing. There is a humongous population of senior citizens, uh, uh, super senior citizens who are facing a lot of challenges in terms of how to really stop themselves from compromising their own security. Very big challenge there, actually. So it's not just that the threat is coming from DDoS attack, or it is coming from an email or ransom. It could be a simple SMS to you with a link that please update your KYC to activate your debit card or your savings bank account, whatever. And people are not even aware that whether it is a genuine message or not. The sender's identity is not verified. So I posted something a couple of weeks back on LinkedIn, and I was in argument with someone who said, no, if the message is coming from a personal number, obviously there are challenges. But I said, and he said that if it is coming from an API-based SMS solution, it could be it would be probably be verified by the TRAI. I said you are absolutely right. But how would a consumer, a senior citizen, a super senior citizen, my own parents, how would they come to know really that whether the sender is a genuine sender or not? Okay, I am in cybersecurity business. I know maybe something about cybersecurity, but I do not still know whether the identity which is verified by the TRAI is sending the genuine kind of an SMS or not. So there are really a lot of challenges which need to be addressed. These things are yet to evolve. But the main problem from the enterprise side, as I said earlier, security by compliance and not by design.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I do agree with you. Rajeev, if you can join, can you share your vision for the question we are discussing on, Rajeev?
Sure, absolutely. I think three stalwarts discussing this much before my point. I think most of the points were covered. But having said that, I'll probably allude to the fact that we always talk about people, process, and technology, right? So I just wanted to sort of quickly throw light on the fact that why is there so much of information loss that is happening? Why is there so many breaches that are happening? I think Prashant just alluded to it. I'll just probably briefly touch upon that as well. People are the weakest link, and whether it is a consumer, whether it is an employee working for a large corporate, whether it is people like us, people are the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, right? And I think attackers have realized this, and we've also observed in the last 1.5 years of the pandemic, the number of phishing attacks, spear phishing attacks, etc., happening has just gone through the roof. So there is no measurement today of human, awareness or a preparedness, which is happening in the organization. So no organization has a human awareness or preparedness, sort of index to measure that. Coming to the process part, people, I think Vishal touched upon it, and instead of looking at it as a tick mark activity, the minute more CISOs get more empowered and they have a larger team in place, right? Then you can look at understanding, proactiveness rather than reactiveness, and zero trust framework, etc. are good, jargon. But the starting point itself is missing in a lot of large organizations, and they've kept the doors open, right? I mean, typically, if you look at source code, passwords which are hard coded into your source code, right? I mean, they are all potential breaches because developers have left, but the source code is still, still carries your passwords. And the focus is always on privileged users, and none of them are focusing on users across the enterprise. And that's where zero trust framework sort of falls through the cracks. And coming to the technology part, obviously there is a complexity that has come up with SaaS-based applications coming in, your own private cloud setups which are there, and now your own public cloud setups which are there. And companies have hybrid infrastructure, right? And a solution that is good from a cloud perspective, may not necessarily be focusing on the on-prem infrastructure that they have. So complexity is increasing, and I think this is going to be an ongoing journey. And the potential impact of this is that you will have to live through breaches, and you're as good as the last breach, right? And the more proactiveness you show as an organization today towards your posture, I think that's what will matter the most. And most importantly, how quickly can you recover? Because people today don't know how quickly they can recover, and that's, I think, the biggest problem which will impact any business. Numbers can be 10%, 15%, crores, billions, but the impact is because people don't know how quickly they can recover if there is a breach tomorrow.
Absolutely, you are right, Rajeev. So now I will ask the question start from Vishal. How will the data protection laws which are under consideration would impact business?
So I think, we all on the panel agree that, compliance, and I think especially Prashant Bhai has said that, in India, the compliance-based security is something that a lot of customers are implementing. See, it is something like this that if you can't, it is something exactly like this. If you cannot really have an appropriate behavior, we will ensure that, you need to start filing compliances and do that. Although I still believe that is going to really, have a very limited impact by saying that, organizations will definitely, need to start investing in better cyber security, and especially data leakage or data pilferage, techniques, because ultimately they'll be the one who will be responsible for ensuring to file compliances. And because as the law seems to be coming up, you would have a very stiff financial penalties, as well as you could be put behind jails, behind bars for that particular purpose. So we will see a lot of top-down approach start to happening with the DPO coming into the picture, and data security laws to be followed up and other things. All of that will happen. For example, similar things. We have all other mandatory laws which are there. Are being followed. I still believe the problem, which I think Prashant has said, is something which is not going to get addressed, from that particular perspective. How do you really safeguard our one of the most vulnerable ones, which are illiterate, elder ones, and other things, who may not have a large amount of data, but a very simple data of they're having their passbook, or they're having their username, passwords, bank details, their Aadhaar card, getting lost, and or they're sharing with willingly end up sharing with other people because they do not understand this. So I think a lot of technology would need to be done. I mean, if you look at a lot of these payment gateways and other things have started to say that this payment looks to be fraud when you're trying to really enter a particular thing, so that a lot of these people can become little guarded. So as far as this compliances are concerned, it is definitely going to bring in a lot of discipline to a lot of this private enterprise. But on the other side, has GDPR ensured that there is no data breach from any enterprise? Answer is no, because again, you can have the good compliance, but you may not be secure, because it may say that you can have you need to have a 8 passwords or 8 complex passwords, and if it is called PASS and maybe some other word, and do that, which is easily hackable, then you can't do that. Another thing. So I think it is again I think what everybody on the panel is really saying is that we need to go back to our basics. We need to really start focusing on trying to ensure that we make password or password protection very, very strong. We need to really put a lot of emphasis and onus on individuals, and not only look at privileged users, as I think we've been told. We also need to look at how everybody in the system, because of singles, if you look at it, before you really attack any privileged user, you need to be authenticated by within the system. So normally people would look at a weak user and then upgrade themselves to the privileged user. So that is how the attack chain really happens. So we need to ensure that we are keeping our strengths uniform, not only up. Maybe top one we've made more secure, and downwards we don't care. It is not going to happen. It is not going to happen.
Okay. So how Mr. Jain, do you agree with Vishal what he has said?
100%. There's absolutely no doubt. Vishal has really articulated it quite well. Just to add few things to it, so laws like Personal Data Protection Act or GDPR, yes, would mean more compliances, would also mean more reporting. So previously, there would have been data breaches, but they probably go unreported. Now there would be a mechanism wherein these reportings are mandatory from the enterprise side to various bodies, whether nationally or internationally, depending upon the kind of business or the region of business one might be into. But again, as I said, security would still be required the perception would be required to be changed from what do you call security by compliance to security by design. That's why there's a big role of regulatory compliances. Unfortunately, in India, we are more reactive to adopting such kind of compliances, I would still say. So personal data protection bill has been ready and has been shared among the enterprises since 2018, and we are in 21, and there's still no visualization as to when this bill would be tabled and get passed. The draft has already been shared with the enterprises. We are talking about IoT a lot now. Enterprises have started rolling out products based upon IoT, but is there a regulatory body on IoT? No, we will have a regulatory body only when some breaches would happen on the IoT devices, and then only we will, as a reaction, come up with a regulatory body. We are extremely, I'm so sorry to use these words, we are in India, we are so very reactive about all these things and not proactive, as Rajeev had pointed out in his earlier statement, that a lot more proactiveness would be required. Probably passwords are something which, in my opinion, should evolve and would definitely evolve to a passwordless mechanism, because practically speaking, there are so many passwords, and yes, one tends to keep the same password for many applications, many devices, which again is a very big challenge. So all these things would, yes, evolve. This is what I wish to say here.
Good. Mathew, you must have a different perspective.
Very unlikely on this, Deepak. I think, like Vishal had mentioned, sometimes he told that I stole most of the thunder before. This time, I think both Vishal and Prashant took up all the answers, so I don't know what to now talk about. But having said that, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So now coming back to what you said, I just want to add maybe a couple of points. I think they've covered it quite well, right? But I mean, when it comes to data protection or DPA or PDP, right? We already have some of the other countries which are way ahead, right? We talked about GDPR, which is well known in US. In Australia, we have the Australia Privacy Act. In Singapore, it's called PDP. Japan, it's called PDPA, right? And all of this basically set rules for how personal data should be processed and stored. And not only that, it also lists people's rights with respect to their personal information. And like I think even Prashant had talked about, these laws also mandate reporting of breach, which is very important, right? And those dates may change from 72 hours to 30 days, depending on which country did the breach happen, or which is the country under which the governing laws do. And all of them have very stiff penalties. Now, even in India, like Prashant talked about, that it's been proposed and it's there in front of the parliament. Even here, obviously, it does the same, right? It sets rules for the personal data, and obviously it gives rights to people's personal information. And obviously, it sets penalties. Now, even the proposed penalties, which I saw in one of the reports, which was there, was close to $2 million, right? Or 4% of the global turnover. That's the kind of proposed penalties which are there. Now, we have to see what finally gets approved and comes out. But even here, that's the kind of stiff penalties for non-compliance which we are talking about. So companies will have to now move away from perimeter-based security, which is what they've been working on. And like Vishal mentioned, right, initially, they'll have to move away to basically people and processes, move away from focusing on the security technologies to focusing on people and processes, right? Or basically the behavior part of the whole thing. And specifically with remote work and hybrid work becoming the new normal, right? Whether we like it or not, that is going to be the normal. And we are going to have, like earlier you had one office, now every home office, every remote location is going to become an office, right? Which is going to be beyond your security network, which you are going to have when you had a physical office. So if you have
builders are offering, sorry, Mathew, but builders are offering houses today which have a small space for your office also.
Absolutely. Highlighting. So basically what I meant to say is, earlier if you had 100 employees, all 100 were at office, you had one security poster to cover every 100. Now, if you have 100 different offices, if they're working from home, so your security poster should not only cover your base location, but 100 different offices, right? So that's what I would like to add on to whatever Vishal and Prashant talked about. I think.
Wonderful. Yeah, you are right, Mathew. And,
I think Rajeev has the I think Rajeev will have the most difficult time now, because most of it the other three of us have covered.
Different perspective. Rajeev, can you add your response to the question we are discussing?
Yeah, is ditto allowed? Because I think I can say 3 times ditto, but from our perspective, I'll just quickly summarize possibly what the other panelists mentioned very relevantly, of course, right? See, as far as personal data is concerned, yes, you have data protection acts, etc., which may ultimately help the consumer more from a perspective of an individual consumer, right? So that your data is protected and your breach possibilities come down. But when it comes to the industry governance, I mean, there are industry bodies like RBI, IRDA, etc., which are SEBI, which are governing organizations today. And I allude back to the same point that I had made earlier, and as well as Prashant touched upon it. Even that potentially is not being done very proactively. It is also being done very reactively. So industry-based governance is 50% tick mark and 50% seriousness. Personal data protection in the making, potentially huge amount of time and effort to inculcate, possibly adopt and accept. It's going to be, an uphill battle, if you think from our perspective versus an attacker, for us it is going to be an uphill task, but it has to be done. So I think there is no common ground which has been created. Like Prashant again mentioned, this for IoT, there's no governing body, right? Unless some breaches happen, people will not realize the importance of that. So unless there's a common ground between organizations and consumers and the governing bodies, the adoption will be in fits and starts, and it is going to take a long time. So as long as the Shri Krishna Committee report, etc., has been used for references throughout, but as long as there's a common framework that is arrived at, it is going to be very difficult for organizations, because it's all a matter of how you perceive it and how you deploy it, right? So perception plays a very key role. So as long as our perceptions don't change, adoption will not change.
You're right, Rajeev. So now we'll move to the third question. What is your thoughts on relevance of passwords in the current times, and do you see passwordless being the future? We'll start with Prashant.
I've already touched it upon in my previous statement that passwordless probably will be something which will evolve. It will probably be the fastest growing area in the IT security. This is what my individual perception is. So we work a lot in the fintech industry. So people might be aware, everybody is aware that they've now started issuing those credit card, debit cards, which have that Wi-Fi kind of a symbol wherein you don't even need to enter your PIN. So that is something again which is like a passwordless. Again, I'm working on one of the requirements again from a new age payment bank for wearable payment devices, which means instead of taking out your card, maybe if you're wearing a watch or like a band, friendship band, also there are flexible payment chips which can be embedded into such kind of devices. You can simply tap your hand or that device and simply make that kind of payment. And the manufacturers have made it very, very flexible as to you tell us where you need to embed this chip, we'll do it for you. It could be a weird thing like a collapsible mug. It could be something like a charm hanging from a lady's handbag. It could be anything, something like a sticker maybe at the back of your mobile phone. So all these things are being discussed by enterprises in the financial technology world, wherein these things would be actually, and these things really attract the millennials. So this is probably the way forward, in my opinion.
Okay, good. Vishal, how you will present your perspective on it?
So, see, again, I think if you look at it, most of the people in technology, have come to this, gospel truth saying, as much as we'll talk about people and processes, people would not follow that. Okay, and it is not. So we need to ensure that we give them the solutions which can work way beyond that particular thing. So if you go back and look at the leadership, like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple, they all are working on something, making everything passwordless, which is there. So so they are saying, and I just hope that I'm saying it rightly. It is not what you know, is who you are, is something which is going to define the password for you. So that means it is your biometric, it is your iris, it is maybe your speech, or something that you will accept. So it is going to become humanly interactive stuff. Microsoft has just moved to totally passwordless on their platform. I think last 24 hours or 48 hours, or maybe last one. But you don't need passwords to access Microsoft services anymore. So imagine that this is how, if you're going to consume their things, which you used to ask passwords every now and then, and we've got used to passwords as a concept from Microsoft. And that is, if they have moved it away, I think that is where the future really lies. That is what.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that what we are able to achieve is that we are able to do intelligent monitoring. That if, because I know my user authentication, and I can share it with my friend or my son who may not be here in India. He can still access that particular information from anywhere in the world. Similarly, the similar thing can be used by a hacker once he knows that particular. But that will become difficult, to do that. So you are able to do, far more proper authentication, from that particular thing. So I don't think there is any debate left on, whether the, passwordless society is going to happen. It is about how much of passwordless that we're going to become. I think it is always going to be towards that. And I think, for heaven's sake, I would expect that at least, when you have to just remember one password, we all will do efforts to really make that one as at least complex. So I think that is something, which is there. So I think that is what is there, because I think Mathew had mentioned one of the reports, which I think also was from One Password, or something like that, that I read few weeks back, which said that in spite of getting breached more than 38 or 40, I mean the number is even higher than 40%, I think, don't really change their password even post that. Because what will happen is that maybe my organization has got breached. I may not have got directly impacted, but I could have been the reason to really make the impact within an organization. So I don't do that. So I think we need to really look at from this particular perspective, that passwordless is definitely happening, and all these big tech data companies, which where we are dependent of our personal and professional life every day, they will make it sure that it happens. Rest of the things, I think rest of the technologies will continue to, whether bank would implement it. I mean, if bank is making a platform which is based on either Google or on Microsoft or on Apple or other things, they'll automatically start to consume all of those things.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, Vishal. Mathew, you have something to add on it?
Yeah, I think finally we have some point where I can debate a bit on this perspective, because till now we were all on the same page. I do agree that passwordless may be the future, right? But I would just like to quote Bill Gates of Microsoft. In 2004, he had mentioned death to passwords, right? I don't know if you've seen that quote. In 2004, in one of those conferences, he did mention saying there's the death of password. But 17 years later, there are still 300 billion passwords in use. Right, so passwords continue to have a strong relevance, and it's not just when I say 300 billion. Let me give you some other data points, which was done by LastPass State of Password Study, right? Which is like across the globe, small businesses have, and this was around 2020, maybe a year earlier, that have 85 passwords per user, and large businesses have around 45 passwords per user. Obviously, it may have some personal passwords there, right? So it will take some time before it will move to truly passwordless. And like Prashant mentioned, obviously there would be a lot of variables and a lot of new tech people, tech companies which will try out new technologies. But passwords, I think the relevance will continue for a long period to come, right? But will it change? Yes, it will change at some point, but that may not be in the near future because of the amount of password still in existence, right? Like the discussion we were mentioning, Vishal did mention, right? If you to even remember one password. Now, when you have 85 passwords, how do you remember one password? The best way to is to have an enterprise password manager today, right? And have all your passwords in that and remember that just one password and create it the strongest possible you can do, right? So, and obviously what happens is, like one of the esteemed panelists had mentioned, we'll end up investing all the security posture around the important person in the organization, right? The privileged user. But the risk is the most vulnerable guy. It's like having your main door and your back door fitted with Godrej locks, the most expensive locks, and keeping your window open, right? So all our investment has to ensure, and we have realized breach happens because of passwords, and passwords are going to stay relevant. So maybe investment in that area could be a good bet during this time. But from your question, yes, it will be the future, but I believe it's not going to be the near future. Near future passwords will stay relevant.
Good. Thanks. Rajeev, please share your response to the discussed topic.
Sure. Yeah, I think useful points from all three panelists, and I just have a few things to add there. If you look at passwordless today, yes, companies have actually started adopting biometric-based authentications. People have started adopting, multi-factor authentications to the point of having PKI, right? As well from a passwordless authentication point of view. But it is going to be an uphill task from a point of deploying and ensuring that all passwords get churned out of your organization. That is never going to happen, at least in the near future. So all we can do is we can ensure that at least the machine-to-machine communication may actually come out without passwords. That part can definitely be automated, and there are solutions available today, which can enable that. As far as man-to-machine are concerned, we can talk about privileged access management solutions. We can talk about multi-factor authentication solutions, SSO built into them. But ultimately, what happens is, and I'll give you a use case, a very useful anecdote. Right? We deploy privileged access management solutions, and the first thing that we do when we go to a customer is essentially go and do a survey of how many privileged accounts and users are there in the organization, and when was the passwords changed in these privileged accounts. Some very, very large mature organizations, which are multi-billion-dollar organizations, we found passwords have not been changed for 12 years. And the IT team is not even aware that there's a privileged account for a particular server which has been active for 12 years, and the person is no more in the organization. Right? So these are problems which have to be first set right. So you have to first understand what the issue is within the organization with passwords, and then potentially look at plugging that gap. So it is going to be a long drawn process. People have started with IoT. I think Prashant alluded to that, and it's a very valid point. The more IoT, the more user focused infrastructure, or consumer focused infrastructure, the more the issues of password will come up. It is going to be a long drawn process. I can't probably say it is going to be 4 years, 5 years down the line, but the steps have been taken, but there's a long way to go.
Good, Rajeev. So now we come to the last question. I will start with Rajeev. Do you see enterprise password management solutions being relevant in today's times when most large enterprises may already have or in process of deploying SSO and MFA solutions?
Absolutely. I mean, this is sort of a follow-up question to the last point, right? And thankfully, I addressed the last point last, so for me, it's like a follow-up. Like I mentioned, like I mentioned earlier, see today there are enterprise systems that are available which will, from an IT infrastructure point of view, whether it's switching, it's routers, your network devices, your servers, your storage, your databases, and your applications as well, and plus cloud secrets, right? So the only challenge is the spread of infrastructure that customers have complicates the issue. But there are systems available today where person to machine or machine to machine communication within an organization can definitely be managed using password management tools. And it is important because, like I mentioned earlier, there are hard-coded passwords when you have to open a database connection from your application server, right? I mean, those connections are hard-coded. How do you ensure that those need not be hard-coded, or they can be dynamically changed over a period of time, right? So those systems are already available and very well being deployed now within mature organizations. SMB, mid-market, large organizations in financial services yet to go, but or reach there, but they're on the way, right? But as far as the consumer side is concerned, it's going to be very difficult to tell a user that put all your passwords in one bucket and just remember that one password, because it's more to do with the fact that so many disparate systems today, whether I'm accessing a SaaS application using my mobile phone, whether I'm using it on personal time, it's not an official time, it's a personal time. You can't have two different mobility devices, one given by organization, one personal. So all of these challenges are going to continue from a consumer point of view, but from a CIO infrastructure point of view, I think there are enough tools to manage the passwords well.
Good, Rajeev. Thank you. And I would say, Vishal, you have a different perspective, or you agree with Rajeev?
No, I think I would probably call it as I think Mathew probably said it right, that it is not going, maybe on the personal side the password will go out much quicker than all larger enterprises and other things. And before, not everybody would have all those systems in place, processes in place. So having an enterprise password manager is definitely a very, very important intermediary solution that people should at least invest in, by the time the whole process. Because I said, maybe Microsoft would do it, but Oracle would not do it, or maybe other people would not do it. So I think it is extremely important that we have something where we can ensure that we have deposited our keys securely, so that nobody else can use that particular thing. So I think it's a huge requirement which is there, and I think enterprises must invest in this. And companies like people who are not able to invest in products like privileged access and SSO and other things, they should actually ensure that they do the investment in this particular thing. But because at least it will give them some security measure which is there. And SSO is not an answer to, is not equal to password manager. So there is absolutely SSO serves a very different purpose than enterprise password manager.
Right, you are right, Vishal. And I think Prashant has a different perspective.
Not really. I would probably agree with what Vishal has already said. Passwordless, yes, will definitely evolve, but it is not that it is going to happen tomorrow or day after. And it is not that everybody would be ready to roll it out. Rolling out and implementation are again separate things. So for a very small organization like us, even we feel that need that there has to be an enterprise class password manager. There's definitely an investment which is worth considering. By the time passwordless comes into the picture, how secure passwordless would be is again yet to be tested. Rolling out is something else, but again, it has to be tested properly, and the testing will really happen when something is actually rolled out and implemented in the enterprises, and then hackers have their own time spent on such kind of technologies, new technologies which are implemented, because they always have an ace up their sleeve. That's it from my side.
Good, Prashant. I think, Mathew, are you agree with our co-panelist, what they have said?
This I think completely agree, and they covered most of it. So I think yes, in the long term future, like I mentioned, passwordless would possibly be the long-term future. It will take time. Different companies will adopt it at different times, right, and at different pace. But passwords will stay relevant for some time to come. And yes, EPM, enterprise password management, would be a good place to start off your in ensuring you de-risk your breaches which are due to weak passwords, right? But coming back, couple of data points which I would like to conclude it with. One, obviously, if SSOs were the way of securing everything, some of these large data breaches which we heard about globally, obviously I don't want to name them, or the ones we heard in India, they were all very reputed organizations. The first thing they would have done was invest in an SSO, right? Even possibly an MFA, but they still went through the problems they went through. So obviously, and why is it so? Because obviously, like I told you, it's not about the privileged user, it is about the most vulnerable user in the system, right? And obviously today there are a lot of third-party applications, shadow IT applications which are coming up due to BYOD and work from home, which cannot get covered under single sign-on, right? Because single sign-on has a scope which it can cover, a certain amount of applications which it can cover, but it cannot cover all those, your legacy apps, with your specific shadow IT apps which you bring in with because you have BYOD and because you work from home, which do not get covered. So ideally, the good thing would be to have an enterprise password management solution where you store all these apps and then integrate it with your single sign-on, right? Which gives the, in case you have one, which is to provide the right experience to your employees, right? So they use a single sign-on and access to their regular apps which are covered under SSO, and a password manager which covers all the other apps which are not covered under your single sign-on, right? And de-risk the chances of breach. And obviously, I did talk about LastPass study and LastPass. Obviously, LastPass, which is obviously from LogMeIn, which is an enterprise password manager with a multi-factor authentication SSO built in, obviously used by 30 million users globally. Now, that's one of the products which is there in obviously in the market. I mean, it's a global leader. So this is some of my points when it comes to whether password management will be relevant for organizations which use SSO and MFA. That's from my side on it, Deepak.
Like Mathew, you have told, right, LastPass is the ultimate solution, or it will bring a solution. Now, thank you, panelists, for sharing the valuable inputs. Now it is a time for the Q&A session. So we will take a few questions, but out of our panelists, someone has to raise their hand who will respond to the question. Okay. So we'll start with the question like, how come we as a partner can counter attack when customer mention that they already have SSO and MFA solution in their system? Who will take the question?
I think I just covered it. I just covered it. But yeah, I mean, if I have to repeat it again, yeah, obviously, like I said, everything is not covered under SSO, right? Which all the panelists also agreed. You can only have certain apps which will cover under SSO, but all the shadow IT apps, right? All the third-party apps, your legacy apps, you cannot cover under SSO. So you still need something where you don't need to remember multiple passwords, which can integrate with your SSO, right? And that's where an EPM comes into play. So that's from my side, and I hope my previous answer would have clarified to this gentleman who had asked the question. If not, possibly I can always reach out. I mean, they can reach out to me over LinkedIn.
Why are good cyber hygiene routines and practices so vital in today's workplace? Vishal, will you take the question?
I didn't raise my hand, but yeah, I'll answer. I think, one of the most important thing, if you really look at, I think it's very strange that, we are learning probably two things so parallelly, that our human hygiene and cyber hygiene are so important. If you have to really keep these things away from us. See, again, what hygiene really does for us is to protect that we are not in any reactive mode to really go and protect ourselves, after the event has happened. So I think it's far, everybody, I think we knew it right, very early stages. Even in our school, we learned prevention is better than the cure. So I think, it's much easier to implement. It's much simpler to implement. It's much cost effective to implement. And it is the most effective one to implement. So I think, even by doing the proper patching and ensuring that, strong passwords are there, I think we can actually end up reducing a lot of factors. We must understand one very important thing, that, if we leave out, it's like a car thief. Person is going to spend the minimum time or only X allotted time to really go after a particular victim. And if it is beyond that, they would actually shift their focus to the next one, because there is no limit to how many victims are available out in the market. So I think if we have made it difficult for the user or the hacker by saying that, okay, we are patched, we have a strong password, and he's going to end up spending about roughly 2 hours or 3 hours of his time or his machine time. I mean, not even his time, even his machine time to really, crack our passwords. It is not worth his time. He will move on to the next one. A very simple logic answer, which I think is there.
Yeah, you are right, Vishal. I know you are so experienced people, the panel, that it would be very helpful for the audience, the partners, and our CIOs are attending the session. So we'll go for the last question. I will ask to Prashant, how safe is cloud-based security solutions, like you mentioned about LP, and what about data residency? Prashant, you get a response to the question.
Yeah. So personally speaking, data residency laws in a cloud environment is probably, that is my personal opinion, is like a misnomer. Customers today see as a question that whether your cloud instance is in India or otherwise. So my actual take is that even if some cloud service provider shows them that yes, this is the data center, this is the server probably, but that doesn't happen that way, because the replication of the data is happening probably anywhere in the world, because why people shift to cloud is high availability. You don't need a DR as well. So whether the email which is lying, it is not a file which is lying in their in a particular server or a machine. The data is there lying in shape of packets, distributed wherever. It could be uh, at the basement of the building where you are sitting, or it could be anywhere in India, or it could be anywhere in the world. So data residency laws in a cloud environment, my personal take is that something which is overrated, over asked for. I have had customers seeking, I would want to inspect the cloud server. So even if I show you that this is your cloud server, how are you going to verify it? So this is something which is personally my take. Then comes, since we work a lot in the public key infrastructure field, PKI. So when we are talking about keys, where are the keys? Is key also a data? Where are the keys? The keys, even if they are in your, uh, let's say, a FIP certified device hosted in a zone which is outside the Indian zone, is it part of the data residency laws? Is key also a data? These are some of the relevant questions which are always there in the gray area. This is my statement here.
What a wonderful response. It is a good learning curve for us. So finally, we have come to the end of the session. So my key takeaway for the session, I would say, is every year it is becoming increasingly harder to detect phishing scams. And with the progression of technology, they are becoming more sophisticated, highly targeted, and personal, whereas remote workers are becoming a large target for cyber criminals. There are multiple reasons for cyber crime that includes outdated software, secondly, maybe third-party vulnerabilities, and finally, it is our employees. Inside threats are ranged from negligent employees who do not follow security policies. Hence, it is crucial that users' access monitored properly. So I'd like to thank gentlemen on behalf of VARINDIA and LogMeIn for attending the panel discussion session. We have seen a great audience and we'll update you soon on the entire session outcome. Thank you so very much for attending the session. Thank you, panelists Vishal, Prashant, Mathew, and Rajeev for sharing their valuable inputs to the questions we've asked. I am sure the audience delegates, they must have taken a good takeaway learning from the session. Thank you so very much. Namaste.
Thank you
Stay
very
home.
much.
Thank you, Varindia.
Thank you.